Thank you very much, Monica, for that lovely prelude to begin our time together this evening. And my name is Doug Scalisi. I'm one of the pastors here at Brewster Baptist Church, and on behalf of our congregation, I want to welcome all of you who are present here in the sanctuary, all who are watching online, to the Nauset Interfaith Association Seeds of Hate and Seeds of Love service. And it's my privilege to welcome next to the podium the Reverend Charles Nichols, who is the co-convener of the NIA, to welcome and share his welcome and to introduce our speaker for this evening.
Good evening, friends. I'm Charlie Nichols. I live in Provincetown, and I'm one of the co-conveners of the Nauset Interfaith Association. I have to begin by recognizing our other co-convener, Madeline Hillis-Deneen, to thank her for being the driving force in organizing and creating tonight's presentation. Thank you, Madeline. The Nauset Interfaith Association is a consortium of 25 faith communities on the Lower and Outer Cape. And I invite you to take your program home with you where you can read about us and the work we do. For those who are with us virtually this evening, I invite you to visit our website at nausetinterfaith.org, where you can learn more about us. For about 20 years now, Nauset Interfaith has held Holocaust memorial events close to the date of Yom HaShoah, which this year was last week, beginning at sunset on Wednesday, April 27th, to the sunset of the following day. This year, our direction was to explore the causes of the kind of hate that leads to genocide, and then to ask what we as individuals can do to supplant hate with love, to ensure that such a horror never happens again. As our speaker this evening, we're honored to have Professor Robert Melson. Dr. Melson is Professor Emeritus of Political Science and Jewish Studies at Purdue University. His primary area of expertise is in ethnic conflict and genocide, and his interest in the topic derives from his family's experience in Europe, as well as from his field work in Nigeria in the 1960s. In his 2000 book titled False Papers, Dr. Melson tells the story of his family's shared survival during the Holocaust. Dr. Melson earned his PhD from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and he is a past president of the International Association of Genocide Scholars. Please join me in welcoming Professor Robert Melson.
I wish to thank Jessica Doe, co-president of AmHayam, for inviting me to speak this evening, and the Reverend Dr. Scalise, the Reverend Nichols for their introductions, and all of you for coming out this evening. Before starting, I would like to call our attention to 4 important dates in April concerning contemporary genocide. April 24, 1915, the start of the Armenian genocide in the Ottoman Empire. April 19, 1943, the armed Jewish rebellion against the Nazi attempt to liquidate the Warsaw Ghetto. April 17, 1975, the start of the Khmer Rouge Cambodian genocide. And April 7, 1994, the beginning of the Rwandan genocide against the Tutsi minority. Questions concerning the legal definition of genocide, war, crimes, and crimes against humanity, and the punishment of the perpetrators have animated jurists of the Armenian genocide, the Holocaust, Cambodia, Rwanda, and Yugoslavia. Such questions are being raised again with respect through the contemporary Russian invasion of Ukraine. The questions of causality, how and why does genocide like the Holocaust happen, is a different question. It's one that has haunted me all my life and seems to recur, especially in April. My approach as a political historian has been to compare the Holocaust to other instances of genocide in the modern era, especially to those such as the Armenian genocide of 1915, Cambodia 1975, and Rwanda 1994. In each such instance, the perpetrators attempted to exterminate communities that were familiar members of their own societies. It is such domestic destruction that differentiates modern or contemporary genocide from other instances in the distant past or colonial genocide in the 19th century. Consider the Holocaust. During a crisis for German democracy, the Nazis, a revolutionary party, came to power in 1933, establishing a dictatorship under Adolf Hitler. They were motivated by an ideology of radical biological racism, at the core of which was anti-Semitism. They launched World War II by attacking Poland on September 1st, 1939. They then invaded the Soviet Union on June 21st, 1941. And in conjunction with that attack, they launched the Holocaust, not only in Germany, but throughout the lands they had conquered. They started by sending out special killing squads called Einsatzgruppen that followed the army to round up and shoot Jewish men, women, and children in areas that the German army had conquered. Closer to home, on October 12, 1941, such a killing squad rounded up and massacred most of the Jews of Stanislavov, now renamed Ivano-Frankivsk, a small town in Ukraine where my parents and I were staying with my grandfather. They did so by mass shooting and burying the corpses in open pits on the outside of town. We survived because my parents refused the German orders to assemble in the center of town, and we fled and hid with Christian friends. I was 4 at the time. We survived by acquiring false papers of identity, allowing us to impersonate Polish Catholics for the duration of the war. I tell this story in more detail in False Papers, my family memoir. By 1942, the Nazis realized that a more efficient way of exterminating people was by gassing them in gas chambers, especially designed for the task of mass murder. To that end, they constructed 6 killing centers in Poland. The best known is it's called Auschwitz, outside Krakow. The Nazi project of exterminating the Jews of Europe, which they called the final solution, was largely successful. Especially in Eastern Europe, where millions of Jews had lived, there are now a few thousand survivors, remnants of once thriving communities. In Poland, where I was born, there are a few thousand Jews left out of a population of 3 million. The Nazis managed to kill 6 out of 9 million European Jews. But Jews were not the only ones who were killed. Roma or Gypsies too were slated for murder or enslavement. So were millions of Poles, Russians, Ukrainians, Yugoslavs, Czechs, and others. The difference is that non-Jews were not targeted for extermination, what the UN has called genocide in whole. Why did this murderous episode, which we call the Holocaust, occur? 3 elements come to mind. One, a revolutionary party seized state power during a crisis. Two, the revolutionaries were motivated by an ideology that sought radically to transform the political community by eliminating a national, ethnic, racial, or religious minority that had been part of the same community for centuries. And three, the revolutionaries were active in a war that facilitated and made legitimate the project of genocide for the perpetrators. These three elements, revolution during a crisis, an ideology that targets a minority for extermination, and war were present in the Holocaust. But they were also present in the Armenian genocide of 1915, the Cambodian genocide under the Khmer Rouge of 1975, and Rwanda in 1994. It is not the case that all instances of genocide follow that pattern. The total or partial destruction of native peoples by European colonialists follows another pattern in which natives were killed or driven off their land by colonial settlers. Nor, of course, do all revolutions lead to genocide. Some even produce successful liberal democracies in which majorities and minorities can live in peace and mutual respect. How to understand the motivations and conditions that lead people to commit mass murder, how to prevent genocide and crimes against humanity, and how to judge the perpetrators are life and death problems that are with us still. Thanks.
I'm Marietta Nilsson from First Parish, Brewster Unitarian Universalist. Here's a poem by Pablo Neruda entitled, Keeping Quiet. Now we will count to 12, and we will all keep still. For once on the face of the earth, let's not speak in any language. Let's stop for 1 second and not move our arms so much. It would be an exotic moment without rush, without engines. We would all be together in a sudden strangeness. Fishermen in the cold sea would not harm whales, and the men gathering salt would look at their hurt hands. Those who prepare green wars, wars with gas, wars with fire, victories with no survivors, would put on clean clothes and walk about with their brothers in the shade, doing nothing. What I want should not be confused with total inactivity. Life is what it is about. I want no truck with death. If we were not so single-minded about keeping our lives moving, and for once could do nothing, perhaps a huge silence might interrupt this sadness of never understanding ourselves and of threatening ourselves with death. Perhaps the earth can teach us, as when everything seems dead and later proves to be alive. Now I'll count up to 12, and you keep quiet, and I will go.
Some killed, others helped the killers, or made believe that they didn't know. The large majority was apathetic, unconcerned, uninvolved, indifferent. And the victims died not only because of the killers, they died because of the indifference of the others. Let us not forget, after all, that there's always a second when the moral choice is made. And even in those times when the dictatorship, terror, were unprecedented, German soldiers everywhere, collaborators everywhere, even then there were people, men and women, young and old, rich and poor, who simply said, no, we won't do it. We'll open the door, we'll take in someone and help. So it is possible for the human being, alone, often alone, to say no to death.
There were 13,000 who were taken during the 3 days, 14th, 15th, 16th of July. Of these, of 13,000, most of them were women and children. When they came for a roundup, some of the women with their children, some of the women jumped out the window. There were 51 suicides of that kind. Mothers would jump out the windows with their children rather than be taken. I was 7, and we lived on the first floor in an apartment. I lived with my mother. My father was a prisoner of war, and my mother was active in the resistance. Things were dangerous. The concierge of the house lived, she lived downstairs, and there was a kind of corridor between her apartment and the front door. And about 5 o'clock in the morning, she ran up and yanked us out of bed and said, they are coming for you. And she drew us quickly into her apartment and put us, my mother and me, into a closet, a broom closet. So when the search team came in and they asked for us, she said, oh, you know how Jews are. They live in poor places like that, but they all have money and they have a country house, and they've gone up to their country house. And they went for it. In the meantime, of course, standing there, I had two feelings. One of them was, yes, how can she say such terrible things about Jews or about us? But on the other hand, that wasn't a strong feeling. The real strong feeling was, you know, I was safe. If she was taking care of things, she was taking care of things. She had, you know, this conviction that I was her charge and she was going to protect me, and that was that. My Marie's husband, who was called by everybody Monsieur Henri, he was fetched from his job, and he took me. I was 7, and we walked outside, and they were, in fact, there were German soldiers right outside. I remember that, and that he held my hand, and I was trembling. My hand was shaking some, and there were trucks full of Jews being rounded up. And he told me, and I remember that it was like the refrain from the whole occupied Paris wartime to children was, you know, look at your feet and keep on walking. It's like a slogan throughout the war, and he said the same thing. And he said, you know, look at your feet, keep on walking. If anybody calls you, don't answer. don't look up, don't answer. So we walked like that, nobody called. And I looked at my feet, and we reached the subway entrance. And I remember a wonderful sense of safety going down underground into the subway.
I was on my way to classes at the School of Social Work, and there was this small home for orphans and other children who weren't being taken care of, and it was a Jewish home. And as I went by, they had a truck out there, and they were loading the children in the truck, and the children were upset, of course, and they didn't climb in fast enough, and the Germans picked them up wherever they could reach them, arm, leg, whatever, and threw them into the truck. And it's funny, I've told this story about 6 times now, but I still have trouble with it. There were 2 other women coming down the street, and they attacked the Germans who were doing it, and they threw them in the truck too. And I just sat there. But that was when I decided that if there was anything at all I could do to prevent any of this, I was going to do it. I guess it was somewhere in 1943, I was asked to take care of 3 children and their father. The youngest was about a week old at the time, and the others were 2 and 4. We moved into a house out in the country about 20 miles east of Amsterdam, and we just trusted and prayed that that would work. We had a hiding place in the living room. We could get him in there and the whole business covered up in about 30 seconds. This particular night, 4 Germans came, led by a Dutch policeman whom I'd known all my life because I knew that area very well. I've spent holidays there since I was 2 years old. And they didn't find the hiding place, but the Germans often would come, and if they didn't find the hiding place, they learned to come back an hour later, because by that time you would have let people come out of the hiding place if it wasn't one where people were all the time. But the children were in too that night, and the baby began to cry, and I let them out after about half an hour after the Germans left. And then this Dutchman came back, and I had a small revolver that another friend of mine had given me just in case, but that I had never planned to use. And I felt that I had no choice except to kill him. And I'd do it again under the same circumstances, and it still bothers me. And there should have been another way, but I couldn't think of anything else to do. The local undertaker was very helpful, and he put the body in a coffin with somebody else. And they had a big family funeral, and they didn't know they were burying 2 bodies. The policeman was local, and everybody hated him. All the people who were against the Germans. And if they had, I think that if somebody had really tried hard to find out how and where he died, they could have, but thank God they didn't, though I did sweat it out for quite a long time.
At that time, I worked serving breakfast, luncheons, and dinner to the German officers and secretaries. But only one thing. Behind that hotel, there was a ghetto. And I first time realized what was happening to the Jewish people. I did see the death march. They pushed them like cattle through the middle of town. I did see old men look to me like rabbi with a white beard, white hair, and most of all, the children, all sizes, all ages. The little one was screaming, crying, "Mama, Mama!" And the bigger one, they were even scared to cry. On one thing I remember, the eyes, a big, scary, looking, searching, like asking, "What did I do? What did I do?" So then I prayed and promised, I will help. Then the plant did have to move farther to Tarnopol. There I did the same work, serving breakfast, luncheons, and dinner to the officers, secretaries, and also the local head of Gestapo. I spoke quite good German, and serving, I was able to overhear conversation. And the major gave me another job to take care of the laundry for the officers. There I met 12 Jewish people. We become good friends. But when the time came for the total liquidation of ghetto, those 12 did not have place to go. And you know, next day in the morning, the major called me to his office and he said, "Irene, I would like you to be my housekeeper." Well, when I did go see the villa, the Lord made a decision. I mean, without planning or doing anything more. I put those 12 in the cellar and kept them there. And in September, I was in town. And all of a sudden, the Gestapo was pushing the whole people from the street to the marketplace. And there, we did have to witness Polish family be hung together with the Jewish family, middle of the market street. And we did have to stay and watch to be a warning what happened when you befriended a Jew. When I came home, I locked the door like I do usually, but I usually leave the key turned in a lock, so if the major would come unexpectedly, he could not open. But I was so shocked up. So I locked the door. I even locked it, but I pulled the key. I came to the kitchen, and there were Ida, Fanka, Clara, Miriam. The women came out, because that's what they usually did, to help me. I was white like a snow, so they asked me what's happened. I said, "Nothing. I don't feel good." I could not tell them. What could they do? We talking, and the door opened, and the major was standing in front of us. I still can see his chin shaking, his eyes with unbelief, and we were all frozen like statues. And he turned around in silence, and he walked to his office. I did have to go and face him. There was no any other way. He yelled at me, he said, "Irene, how could you do it? I trust you. I gave you such a nice home, protection. Why?" I said, "I know only one thing. They're my friends. I did have to do it. I did not have a home to take them to my home. I don't have a family. Forgive me, but if I would do it again," so nobody has right to kill and murder because of religion or race. He said, "You know what can happen to you?" I said, "Yes, I know. I just witnessed." By the time I was crying, you know, I could hardly talk. And I said, "Yes, I witnessed that." And he said to me, "Look, I cannot do that to you. I cannot just let you die. And when he said that, believe me, I kneel down and I kiss his hand. Not for me, but for those people. They were alive and they did have hope.
Oh, that was special. My name is Ken Campbell, and I am the treasurer of Nauset Interfaith. For many years, I was the convener. And I just want to say a few words. I remember when Nauset Interfaith was established, and that was in 2001. Where does the time go? And at that time, you remember what happened on 9/11. There was a clergy group in Orleans, and there were about half a dozen clergy. And they were all men, white men. And it had occurred that in response to 9/11, we needed to change this group. We needed to become a group that was more representative and inclusive of the wider community where we all live here on Cape Cod. And so the first person that was invited to change this group from just a men's clergy group to an interfaith group with a broader focus was a member of a Hayam, Jean Saklad. And Dr. Jean was the first person, and what a spark he was. And since that time, it's more than 20 years now, and until Jean's death, I think about 2 years ago, the group broadened and changed from being a group of white male clergy, Christians all, to now that we have not only Jean, but Nancy Dan, who represents the Islamic community here on Cape Cod, and all sorts of other folk with many different views. Also, where now half of us are clergy and half of us are laypersons. Half of us are male and half of us are female. So we are a much more representative group, engaging with each other and with the wider community. So that we can do, and I'm not going to go into the work we do. I'm sorry, have you heard anything I said? I didn't realize I needed to be closer to this. What else do I want to say? One other thing, I guess in being treasurer, as our group has grown over the years, and we've tried to make a difference for the marginalized and those who are abused on Cape Cod or forgotten, and to educate ourselves, it's cost a lot of money. A couple of banks have given us grants and a few other organizations, but most of our support has come from individuals with their small donations and also some beautiful letters of support and encouragement and challenge, small and large, all across the calendar. So anything that you can do to support us is much appreciated. I also wanted to mention, I just finished reading a book by Isabel Wilkinson. What's the name of it? Oh. Yes. Have some of you read it? Wow. What a book. And one of the things that struck me in the book was silence. Not the good silence that is so important for us to discern the power of love present, but the silence where we betray what we are called to be as God's children. And the many opportunities that we have to educate ourselves, others, and our community about what's really important and what we need to do. So, I'll shut up. And thank you very much. Oh, and if you haven't checked, it should say Nauset Interfaith.
In the process of working throughout the South and going to jail and getting beat and being in mass meetings and singing, there's one particular song that became the theme song of this movement. It is a powerful song. You can go anywhere in the world today where there is struggle, and you will find this song, and you will still see people in the streets marching and singing it. It is our gift to the world people in struggle. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. Lord, we shall overcome someday.
My husband, who had his master's degree in speech arts, was also an ordained Presbyterian minister, so we often worshiped at the Presbyterian Church in Jackson, where my husband became acquainted with the pastor, who told him he thought his congregation was ready for integration, so he invited my husband to bring students. He did that. The following Sunday, they were turned away at the door. They went to a Baptist church on one occasion, and the greeter there said, "You are not welcome here. This is a private church of God." All right, well, I have to say we were Christians in the sense that, Jesus is a champion, or was a champion of the oppressed. Mm-hmm. We would have been subject to many threats. We were considered to be communists, outside agitators, because my husband was teaching at a black school. In Pennsylvania, I don't remember seeing a black person as I grew up and went to school. But it was just an innate sense of justice.
We didn't know a lot about what was happening other than that we were going to cross the bridge and walk toward Montgomery. And we thought we were going to go to Montgomery. Well, there were a lot of people. More than 1,000. I want to say 2,000. I don't know. I can't remember. But we got 4 abreast and we started walking across the bridge, and there were 3 men and a young man, probably your age, maybe a little younger than you, African American. He was wearing bib overalls, and he was walking with a friend of mine and me and somebody who I can't remember now. And the four of us were walking across, and I began to feel this terrible panic because on the other side I could see this huge group of people. I was afraid, and terribly afraid. And as I went across, got midway up, I looked down at the river, which was on my left side, and it looked deep. And I thought, well, this is a bowed bridge, but I should be able to, I'm a good swimmer. I could, you know, if something going, I mean, I wasn't at the forefront of the group. That was the real leaders of the group. If they start fighting, I could jump off. And there was, this young man was just beside me, and he was singing at the top of his lungs. And when he stopped singing, I said, "Aren't you afraid?" And he said, "No, sir, I'm not." So he had bib overalls. In those days, overalls were common. And dirt on his shoes, you know, he looked like a farm kid. And I said, "Well, why aren't you afraid?" And he said, "'Cause you're walking with me."
It was very hot that summer, and I worked with a fellow by the name of James Lewis, and he said, "Why don't we go to a state park and have a swim? Bring some black kids with me." On the way down there, I said, "Jim, is this park integrated?" He said, "No." So I said, "All right." So we took the children down to the beach. There were lots of white kids in the water. The black kids went for a swim, and at that point, the parents took all the white kids out of the water. So there were just us and the three children there. Things got hostile, and we decided to leave. And they formed a gauntlet for the two white guys and the three blacks, and spit on us and cursed us, and it was pretty bad. But we tried to get out of there peacefully, and we were followed out all the way to the front gate. And that left an indelible mark on me, because I had never integrated anything in my life.
We did go to the various lunch counters, restaurants, motels, before the Civil Rights Act of '64, and were able to persuade them to voluntarily desegregate. And we did it by assembling a group of black leaders who would, on a given day, an agreed day with the businesses, and at an agreed time, would go into these drugstores that had lunch counters, restaurants, and so on. And the owner was to prep the people about 30 minutes before the lunch took place. That these people be coming, they're welcomed, I want you to wait on them. If you got problems with this, now's the time to leave. Nobody left, and actually it went off without a hitch. And from that day forward, blacks walked into any restaurant they wanted to.
In any event, this meeting of the City Human Relations Commission was to happen. Naive me gets on the phone and says to my friend who had the Wesley Foundation, "I'll drive. We don't need all to take cars." And then I call the black couple and I say, "Drive with us." So we have the two whites in the front seat and the two blacks in the back seat. The Wesley Foundation minister lost his job.
And some black players were not above showing up a white. When Chicago Cub player Frank Demery made a slur about a Satchel Paige team during a game, Paige responded with his arm. He deliberately walked 3 players to get to Demery, fill the bases. When Demery stepped to the plate, Paige called in his outfielders, told his infielders to sit down. He then proceeded to strike out Demery on 3 pitches.
And I was on my way back to where we were rendezvousing, and I was on the Capitol steps, and coming down the steps was Senator Huey Long from Louisiana. And I said, well, I'm supposed to go up and see these guys. And so I approached him, and I walked in such a way that he wasn't going to be able to scamper down the steps. So I sort of cut him off. And I went through the spiel. I was from the seminary and the civil rights thing, and and identified myself, and we began to have a conversation. But it was really weird. He was comparing all of the choices you make as an individual, and he was comparing it to choosing gasoline, the brand of gasoline you use in your car. I'm going, what does this have to do with the price of groceries? And I kept on challenging him that, and the thing that I appreciate about it is he stayed there. And we kept going back and forth, and probably for maybe 10 minutes. And then he finishes, and this is a verbatim, folks. He finished, he said, son, the reason I'm left-handed to this day is I've had my right hand around my black mammy's neck all during my youth.
Anyway, Mr. Phipps was walking around my yard and looking at all the flowers I like to garden, and I get a call from one of my neighbors. And she said, "Are you looking to sell your house?" I said, "No, why?" She said, "Well, I see this man walking around your property." I said, "Oh, that's our guest."
But from the day we adopted those kids, it was like a lightning rod on top of the house for racism that I would not have believed was there. A lot of white people think there's no racism. I'm sorry. You adopt a black kid, you find out fast. Fast. Took our 3-year-old adorable son in to get shoes. This woman grabs me by the shirt and drags me over. I had the 2 girls as well. She said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I don't know, what am I doing?" She said, "There's going to be incest in your family when those kids grow up."
We have like projects. Some projects are just strictly for whites, and there's some projects also that's black. So, not thinking much as a young kid, I'd go to this project where it's mostly whites. And we're selling raffles. I was in the Catholic school at this time and selling raffles for the Catholic school. And I knocked at this door, and this little kid must have been, I'm going to say maybe 4 or 5.
So younger than you, certainly.
Younger than me, 4 or 5 years old.
White kid?
White kid. I knocked on the door, and the first thing out of his mouth was, "Mom, there's a nigger at the door." I said, "You got to be kidding me." So all I know was what? I didn't say one word. I just did a bow face, and it was gone. And that kid wouldn't know any better if the mother didn't teach him that.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, yes, hallelujah. I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Yes, let it shine. Hallelujah. Let it shine. Let it shine. For you and me, yeah. Let it shine. For you and me. Hallelujah. I'm gonna let it shine. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Yes, for you and me, Lord. I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, let it shine. For you and me. I'm gonna let it shine. Yes. Let it shine. Hallelujah. Let it shine. Let it shine. For you and me, let it shine. For you and me. Hallelujah. I'm gonna let it shine. I'm gonna let it shine. Yes. For you and me.
Leviticus 19:18. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against your countrymen, Vahavta Lareka Kamoka. Love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord.
This is from chapter 49, verse 13 of the Quran. O mankind, we created you from a single pair of male and female, and made you into nations and tribes, that ye may get to know each other, not that ye may despise each other. Verily, the most honored of you in the sight of God is he who is the most righteous of you, and Allah has full knowledge and is well acquainted with all things.
From the Gospel of John, Jesus said, "A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another."
Leviticus 19:34. The stranger who resides with you shall be to you as one of your citizens. You shall love him as yourself, for you are strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord.
The Quran, chapter 4, verse 36. Serve God and join not any partners with him, and do good to parents, kinfolk, orphans, those in need, neighbors who are near, neighbors who are strangers, the companion by your side, and the wayfarer.
From the first letter of St. Paul to the community gathered at Corinth, love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails.
From Pirkei Avot, often translated as Messages or Ethics of Our Fathers. Rabbi Hillel says, "If I am not for myself, who will be for me? If I am not for others, what am I? And if not now, when?" And Rabbi Tarfon says, "Do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly now, love mercy now, walk humbly now. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it."
In a hadith, the Prophet Muhammad is reported to have stated, "The reverence of a neighbor, incumbent on the neighbor, is like the reverence due to one's mother."
From the first letter of John, beloved friends, let us continue to love each other, since love comes from God. Everyone who loves is born of God and experiences a relationship with God. The person who refuses to love doesn't know the first thing about God, because God is love. So if you don't love, you cannot know God.
I'm not on the program tonight, but what I'm about to read turned up in my Facebook memories from 3 years ago, yesterday, and it seems so appropriate. It's a statement by former President Obama on Holocaust Remembrance Day in 2019, and it goes like this. It's easy on a day like this to reflect at something of a distance. The photos are grainy now, dusty artifacts from another era. It was a different world then, we can tell ourselves. Another place, another time. Fully grappling with the reality of the Holocaust, though, isn't so simple. Because before the camps and the brown shirts, before the consolidation of political power, before millions of lives were extinguished, there were simply people, not altogether different from any of us, who chose to see their neighbors as different, as other, as something less. It's a sadly familiar choice, one that we've seen generation after generation. And today, in our world of encroaching division and calcifying bubbles, we've seen once again the swiftness with which that choice, that failure to recognize ourselves in one another, can accelerate into violence. So it's up to us to make a different choice, to choose empathy over apathy, to sow seeds of hope rather than hate, to embrace our shared humanity no matter how we worship, what we look like, who we love, or where our families came from. That's how we can not only pause to remember a tragedy once a year, but act on the lessons we've learned from it every day. And now, if you would all join us in singing, "Let There Be Peace on Earth," and I'm going to step away from the microphone.
Well, on behalf of the Nauset Interfaith Association, we want to thank you all for coming in person and for joining us online, and want to thank everyone for their participation and their sharing. I do want to mention one other opportunity here on the Cape that starts this weekend. Some of you may have seen the story in the paper or know of it, but over at the Harwich Junior Theater or the Cape Cod Theater Company, a play is debuting this weekend called Red Swans, which is about a Cape Cod woman who was a World War II Jewish resistance fighter in Berlin during World War II. It's a true story. Nina Schuessler, it's her mother's experience, and I see many of you are nodding, and so you know this, but I just want to share that opportunity for the next couple weekends if people would like to go and to see that play. I want to close simply by saying at the end of one of his letters, Paul summed up the whole letter. You wonder why he had to write the whole thing, because the concluding verse was simply, let all that you do be done in love. That sums it up pretty well, doesn't it? Go in peace.